Hi, this is Mark Williams. I'm wearing my honorary Paul Spear green flannel shirt for this Domitor presentation. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I'm going to share my screen and show a slideshow and narrate the slideshow. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to bang through this pretty quickly and with any luck, uh, come in close to on time. So let's get this going. This is our panel about the Media Ecology Project case studies. Paul's presentation to our digital tools symposium in May is part of this panel, as well as Jenny Oyalan-Kolaski's presentation. I'm going to be talking about keyframes to cinema history. It's a review of some of the great many slides that are available in the exhibitor catalogs of the AM&B collection. I was able to get access to those at the Seaver Center in Los Angeles, the Natural History Museum. We will have, as part of our NEH grant, digitized copies of the beautiful and pristine exhibitor catalogs of the Museum of Modern Art sometime in the coming year, in 2021. Very much looking forward to that. MEP, as you know, had an affiliation with Domitor for some time. We have an NEH grant we're very excited about. That builds off of a grant that we received for the semantic annotation tool, which allows us to make time-based annotations, including annotations of specific geographic portions of the frame. We put that in concert with another tool that we built called Onomy, which is a vocabulary tool, and create capacities to annotate networked scholarship about early cinema history. We are very excited to welcome scholars and students to help us complete this grant next year, and I'll say more about that at the end of the presentation. Our goals are really to add value to archives and libraries by having scholars make these annotations and do research on them, create network scholarship that can promote this dynamic sense of an ecology of historical media, work with archives regarding the public sphere and public memory, create new experimental research projects and ask new research questions, utilize time-based annotations in particular to address close reading and distant reading, what's called machine learning, and engage with the various complexities of contemporary approaches to culture in general. So we initiated this with a first collection of materials from the Library of Congress. Here's Florence Lawrence, one of our favorite areas of close reading, working with Jenny to innovate these Laban movement analysis annotations about Flolo. We affectionately call her Flolo. We are working to expand that kind of research into some rather sophisticated machine learning tools. Here's that same scene from Baby Shoe, trying to get the machines to be able to read for her performance and her movements across the screen. And also playing with some other new tools that are far from perfect at this point, but can help to analyze screen movement in detailed ways. The early cinema compendium that we're building will join together a lot of different kinds of information, a great many films from the Library of Congress. We're going to significantly overproduce on the grant that we originally imagined. We're also very fortunate to have some fantastic scholarly contributions. Tom Gunning has kindly offered his original notes about the paperprint collection at the Library of Congress. Bucky Grimm, delighted to be working with him with his cameraman database. What I'm going to focus on today are materials from the exhibitor catalogs that are related to this picture catalog. This is a catalog that's available from the Rutgers Library. We hope to put these materials into relationship with Charlie Musser's fantastic Edison book. We've talked to Charlie, we've talked to the Giornati people and we'll see what we can do about that. We certainly hope to. My reflections on these keyframes that are available in the exhibitor catalogs really are informed by a lot of recent scholarship about cinema and cinema history. Ali Field's fantastic book about Black modernity. These two really interesting new books, Daisuke Miao's book about considering the Lumiere collection in terms of what he calls Japanism, and a really wonderful book by Naoki Yamamoto with a fantastic title. And I think this title applies quite a bit to digital humanities, actually, dialectics without synthesis, and refers, I think, in a very nice way to the experimentation and methodologies that we want to promote. Two other books that I won't spend a lot of time discussing today, but they're really important to the way I've been thinking about digital humanities lately, and this project in particular. Bernard Stiegler's notion that we need to re-enchant our relationship to history, and this fantastic book, Racial Melancholia by Eng and Han, which really takes a deep dive into thinking about critical race theory and its significance to contemporary culture. Our biggest contribution came from Paul Spare, our dear and departed colleague, and his fantastic production log of AM and B. And that's the backbone of the compendium. And that will help me go into my bang, bang, bang slides of a selection of materials from those exhibitor catalogs. What I was allowed to do is bring my iPhone in to what is a partially ruined, partially not at all accessible copy of the catalogs. And this is going to be very breezy. I think it wound up being a little more polemical than I expected. I'm not trying to be anything but inviting in terms of scholar and student participation in the project, but the first blush, it really did produce some very critical analyses of these texts. These are among my favorites. I love that there's a selection of these keyframe entries called experimental, the big one being the moving picture machine on the left. And there really is a lot of abstraction and interesting materials in here, a lot of evocative uses of mise-en-scène and lighting styles, even going to a dark screen at the bottom of that final slide. Many examples of trials in how to use camera distance, classic Grandpa's reading glass, which I think every studio made some version of. Seriality on the vertical axis and also seriality on the horizontal axis with those two middle examples. Very daring, risque, possibly belongs in the Museum of Me Too, use of close-ups of legs in that final example. I was taken by the various camera positions that use the same basic location and created extremely different sites of composition and axes of motion in the circus. Some really interesting lighting effects showing folks doing gymnast work on the rings and on ropes. And of course, a great variety of spectacular landscapes in various parts of the world. This really striking snow scenes. I was also struck by, there's something about the St. Clair Tunnel that made people sort of think about abstraction, at least the people who chose the keyframes. And I just love, I really want to see every one of these films. I don't know if they're all extant, but just a wonderful kind of allure to that location, I think. There are a number of spectral representations. Those are very interesting, sometimes based in mythology or religious settings, sometimes based in almost a kind of a sci-fi undermining of what's the Ur narrative of a lot of the peep show films. I absolutely adore Ghost Train. Very simple kind of effect using the negative, but it's, magnificent. Uh, there are also examples of all the films that you will see in Paul's presentation, courtesy of the iFilm Museum. They're one of our key partners for this early film compendium, and very excited to be working with their restorations of 68 millimeter productions. But a lot of what struck me in this initial survey were the materials that really beg to be called to attention regarding contemporary critical theory. These are very famous representations of race, some of them among the earliest films, utilizing a white backdrop, which is significant because of photographic sensitivities and sensibilities regarding skin color and so forth. I'm very curious about this final example, which is obviously a whole other kind of register of demeanor than the classic kind of Jim Crow stereotypes. Class and race have a lot to do with styles of dance, and I find all of these examples really compelling. There's a kind of a buoyancy to the examples on the edges, and very kind of frank eroticism regarding the Bowery dancers in the middle. Very many star attractions in terms of dances, as we know from the history of cinema. And this collection features quite a number of them. Surprising number of these exoticized, quote unquote, foreign women dancers. And it's clearly a mini trope within the portfolio. Some really dark humor in that example on the left regarding cannibalism, I think. A lot of different reasons to show the body in motion, and some of them have to do with calisthenics. I'm not entirely sure. The images on the left are from a series that were shot in the same schoolroom, I believe. I think these might be the only ones with African American children, and they're doing calisthenics. I'm not entirely sure why. Of course, an array of more colonialist, imperialist kinds of depictions, oftentimes also having to do with gender representations. So, two examples of harems rescuing a white girl from the boxers, etc. Many sort of slanderous stereotypes regarding Chinese people, regarding Italian people, regarding African American people. The representations of China present a really interesting kind of prism of how the quote unquote other, or at least the non American, is represented. And part of it has to do with thinking about commercial centers like the Bund in Shanghai. Part of it has to do with what looks to be, and I'm not entirely sure, but on the left might be a film about people being deported. I'm not entirely sure. And then Li Hongchang was somebody who was depicted quite often, or at least a handful of times in the Biograph films. And here he's being presented a mutoscope. So there's a kind of reflexivity, really, what I'm thinking of as a prismatic series of representations regarding China, both as a threat and as an opportunity, I suppose. The peep show is clearly fundamental to a lot of these films. And at first it seems kind of amusing, and there's so many opportunities for this kind of Ur narrative of a photographer or an artist alone in a room with a scantily clad or body stockinged woman, and then being interrupted by, I imagine the wife or, somebody who disapproves. It's really becomes kind of a drag after a while. It's so omnipresent. Nevertheless, there are a variety of ways in which it becomes undermined or queered, if you will. I'm not sure that their use of queer is our use of queer. Um, I really love the simplicity of this film on the left. It's just a young woman in repose along the water and divorced from that or narrative. Women who want to be boys, models who turn into skeletons, uh, customers who become zombies. There might be some relationship to the death drive in some of these films, and maybe that absolute rapidity of the Ur narrative is a kind of represents a kind of death drive. I don't know. And plenty of opportunities to just upend the gaze, the intended gaze, and it's almost always a male gaze. Um, some images that people on Facebook were recently sort of wondering what they were like. Tribulations of an amateur photographer, what the bathing girls did to the Kodak fiend, another camera fiend. Uh, Very interesting, raucous kind of depictions. Some actor studies, which are very different in their look and feel. Again, this is more of a black background with a Caucasian actress. A lot of different tonalities that are being affected. Um, she was a vaudeville and film performer who is um, given a really nice turn in these early Biograph films. Plenty of films of little kids, thank goodness. Absolutely charming. Uh, Sometimes playing with the animals, sometimes just hijinks, you know. Again, very often with a silhouette kind of background, sometimes outdoors, but New York, very popular topic. I love the title of that third film, 25 Stories Up, exclamation point. The modernity is all over these films, and Brian Jacobson's notion of there being an affiliation between cinema and the modern city is all true in these. I love the bicycle film also. Lots of films of amusement parks and the Pan American Exposition and so forth. Great varieties of images in those. Some very interesting examples of process documentaries, and I think maybe in honor of the recent political elections in America and the attempt to upend the postal service in that regard. Some very, I think, charming process films regarding the postal service back in the day. And then a lot of films having to do with Native American appropriation. I'm going to kind of end with this. It's such an important political fact of American life then and now. And you really want to see representations of Native Americans, and at the same time, you're very leery of seeing representations of Native Americans. I think we want to know more about these performers and thinking about critical race theory and Louis Shidsakai's notion of the mask behind the mask and what it meant for Native Americans to be performing in this kind of way. And then there's a series for the U.S. Interior Department that's in the last book that really, by the time I got to this point, I was really thinking about the seriality of some of these images. They weren't necessarily screened in a serial fashion, but they were captured with a certain kind of seriality that I think is very telling. so that these marvelous landscape photos, all for the USI, also become opportunities to visit reservations and Indian schools by the USI and see a variety of what we now know to be were fairly oppressive, not even fairly oppressive, sometimes just notoriously oppressive institutions. Some of these Indian schools, uh, we see Moki Indians, we see Navajos, we see I mean, this is just another kind of performing really for the camera, it seems to me. Um, I think those are Hopi Indians perhaps on the right, and also a number of Crow Indians, really a substantial number of films in order that that bring to a real question a different kind of relationship between space and representation, which is the land on which the United States resides, and that's a critical question that I think is going to be continually significant to the 21st century. And this kind of engagement with these materials that have been not available and really kind of fugitive in significant ways are an opportunity to think further about that. So we will have a workshop about Domitor tools in late February. That's the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.